I'm just live. I'm talking to people live. Setting up my second monitor so I can see what you're all up to. Hi Sarah, how are you? Hi Dan. Oh, Dan, can you look at the description on this video and tell me whether I got the times for your stream and Cyan's stream backwards? Who streams first, you or Cyan? Hi Gabor. Hi Fairy Dust. Sarah says, great, just finished an Ian Fennelly workshop. Ooh, I signed up for one of those. Well, I have it's like a video thing and I haven't done it yet, but his art is so cool. I'm really looking forward to watching those videos. I think they're backwards. Dan streams first. Yeah, I thought they might be backwards. So I'll fix that after this video. Fairy Dust says, excellent stream topic. I'm the biggest palette nerd. That was Gabor's idea, so you can thank him. Yeah, I think it's backwards. Yeah, I think it's backwards. Yeah, okay. So I knew that one of you streamed before the other and that I rarely catch you because I tend to sleep in on Sundays and then grab breakfast, and by the time I'm done, the second one of you is already wrapping up your stream. Yeah, I'll just reorder them. Like I knew that you have back-to-back streams, and I'd just forgotten which way around it was. Anyway, yeah, so I'll just fix that later. I mean, honestly, probably most days it would be fine. It's just because it's on Sundays too, and yeah. But you can't find a time that works for everyone, right? Like I know that this time is really difficult. I have some followers in Australia and New Zealand. Joy always comes in partway through, tries to wake up early, but it's difficult, so. Okay, I take the blame. Take the blame for this video topic? No, I think this is great. I don't have energy today for like a really long video, so this is perfect. Because I can just chat for a while and have a nice friendly chat, but it won't be like a 3-hour thing, I don't think. Just waiting for a few more people to join. Why are half of the schminkas unwrapped? Oh, because half of them are schminkas and half of them aren't. So these are the Schminka Academy, which I haven't unwrapped yet or swatched. These are just a similar selection of a variety of different brands in professional watercolors. So I just matched the colors approximately to have a professional set. Like this is sort of like the standard selection of paint, so you'll see that in the Cotmans and in which one? Here we go. This is a Van Gogh version. So there's like a basic standard selection of paints that you tend to get in beginner sets that's somewhat like this. So I matched it just for my collection because I didn't want to buy a standard set just to have a standard set. So I picked out similar things from my own collection, poured them into these pans, and then I've got them beside the Academies that I haven't unwrapped yet because I have a video about it. How's the sketchbook going? A little bit stalled. I really need to get that moving. So it'll be sent this weekend. It's also, yeah, I'm way behind. I start a sketchbook project and then don't send sketchbooks out. How's your sketchbook going? Have you sent yours out yet? I'm sending mine to Jill, and she's at least I'm not sending overseas. Like sending to the US is often actually even faster than sending within Canada, so it's not too bad. Mine will be posted on Monday. I may add a challenge for everyone. What do you mean what do you mean by challenge for everyone? I'm a little confused about that. Can you explain? Sorry, I just need to put something away. Hi, box of paint. Yeah, I still need to do my main sketch. I've got the postcards, but the kittens are warming up. Yeah, how are your kittens, Stan? I will include a small colorful blob for anyone who wants to try some inking over them. Oh, that's really cool. Yes, I like that idea. Okay, so we've got 14 people here. I think I'm just gonna start. What's going on my desk here right now? This is most of my palettes. I think there's like maybe 2 that aren't here. Or just 1. So this is most of my palettes. Now I also have watercolors in tubes, which I keep sorted on a pegboard. I have a video about that. You can dig in and find it. Hi, Paulo, how are you? Well, Loki's very confident and loves cuddles. Lyra's still very nervous, but she climbed on me yesterday by herself, no prompting, etc. Aw, that's so sweet. Yeah. So, in my Discord, which I think I forgot to leave a link. One moment. Sorry, I'm still here. Just have to check on something and grab my coffee. Well, never mind. Anyway, so in my Discord earlier this week, I can link, hold on a sec. Yeah, or I can fix this. Sorry, guys. Invite. Coffee share link. Never. Max uses, save. Yep. Okay. So many palettes. Yeah, it's overwhelming and not great. Now, some of these aren't palettes that I actually paint from. So I have, for example, a number of student palettes, which a couple of them Ev sent to me, and I just have these for teaching classes, so sometimes students could borrow them. Of course, that's not happening recently. That's the one. Sorry. I'm on a lag on my own video. Yeah, so I have Cotman, Van Gogh. This is a different Van Gogh. And then one of the rows on is Schminke Academy. So obviously these ones aren't even open. You can see that the student grade palettes haven't been touched very much. So these are mostly for videos and for teaching. And obviously teaching isn't really a thing that's happening very much right now. Certainly not in person. So this would be something like if I'm teaching a nature journaling class, it's useful to have palettes that I can lend out. People want to try watercolor, but you know, aren't sure that they want to commit to getting their own palette, or if they come in with a palette that's like, you know, one of those really chalky ones, like they've got a koi or one of those children's palettes. Sometimes people come in and they want to try mixing colors, but they just really don't have anything that's remotely suitable. So in that case, I will lend out palettes. And in the past, I have lent out professional palettes, although at one point I had a student walk away by accident with this. And so in general, I would prefer to lend out things that I don't care so much if they get misplaced. Yeah, so I have some student palettes, and you know, that's not for my painting use, that's for teaching purposes. So that's these. That's the other thing that I kind of wanted to discuss is the other reason why I have these. And I'll just focus on this Academy one as an example. But you'll see these are still in their packages. I will unwrap them at some point. But this is just, when you buy a beginner palette, they will often come with this standard selection of colors. You'll have usually a couple of yellows, a couple of reds, something like a middle red, like a fire truck red, and then something a little bit cooler or darker. A couple of blues, often that's ultramarine, and then either like a Prussian blue or a phthalo blue. One or two greens, some earth tones, and then a white and or a black. Yeah, so this is probably the most common palette that I've seen, certainly among students and whatever. This, or there's other versions of this that have the same color selection, but the box is slightly different. Honestly, this little box is like, it's a really nice little size. It's got a decent amount of mixing space. The really unfortunate thing about this palette is the paint in it. The colors are, yeah, so Gavers is my favorite plastic palette, and the colors are okay-ish. So in general, I do sometimes even recommend this. And where I would recommend getting a palette like one of these, if you can get your hands on the Van Gogh or the Schminke Oh, there's one more that I don't, where did it go? I also have a Daler-Rowney Aquafine one. So when I said I have a few more palettes, I knew I was missing something when I set this up. So I have a Daler-Rowney Aquafine little portable palette. It looks very much like this one. It's just a little bit thinner. So you can get, depending on where you are in the world, you can get Van Gogh or Schminke Academy or Daler-Rowney relatively easily and cheaply. And in general, those are some of the better student grade paints. However, if you're in Canada, in a lot of, especially in a lot of smaller cities, you might, these other brands can be a little bit tricky to find. A lot of the local art supply stores will just carry the Cotman, this Winsor Newton Cotman one, and my local art shop sells that small Cotman palette empty. I think it's something like €4. That's fantastic. Is that the sexy looking one with the water brush? Ooh, which sexy looking one with the water brush? I don't recommend the Aquafine palette. I sacrificed 2 normal and 2 water brushes to that palette trying to activate paint. That's interesting that you had that experience. I prefer the Aquafine to Cotman, but so I wonder whether they changed formula at some point, or whether it's a climate thing. So we had a discussion in, I think it was one of Ev's Discord channels, about this Cotman palette. When I first swatched it, when I first got it, it behaved actually a lot better than I had seen student palettes behave in the past. And I was really quite impressed. And then I let it sit in my cabinet for a few months through the Canadian winter. And so obviously we have heaters at home, so it doesn't get cold inside. What it gets is very dry because the relative humidity outside, cold air holds a lot less moisture. So when you heat it up, you end up with very, very, very dry air. And so what happened is this dried out, and now it behaves much more like how I've seen these Cotman palettes behave in the past. And in particular, the ultramarine, like to get any kind of color payoff of it is really difficult. The greens and earth tones as well, they're just a little weak. There's a Cotman palette they did a couple of years ago that looks smooth and glossy and comes with a clear water brush. Ah, yes, yeah. So they have a whole bunch of different case designs for the Cotman palettes, but generally the colors are the same. Some of them have 2 extra colors, but you can get so many variations on this. So I would say when I'm teaching classes and people come in with student grade palettes, which is pretty frequent, like, you know, I can bet that in any class, 1/3 of the people are going to come in with a palette like this or functionally identical. Yeah, people say that Cotman is really hard to re-wet, and I never experienced that. So when I first got this fresh, it was a lot easier to re-wet. So I suspect that if you have a climate that doesn't get really, really dry, like the Canadian winter, that you would have better luck with it. Like if you live in a more humid or warmer climate, it might behave better. Right. So actually what I was going to say is I do actually sometimes even recommend these. Because what I'll teach, it depends what I'm teaching. So I feel like this is not very useful if you're trying to develop photorealistic paintings, like a fully colored botanical painting. They just don't glaze or mix strongly enough. But on the other hand, what these are useful for, these or any of the other student grade palettes, anything that you can get just this small little set for a reasonable price, is if you are interested in just adding a little bit of color to like nature journal pages. If you're going to be drawing in ink or pencil and you just want a way to add a little bit of color on top of that, then the fact that student grade paints are a little bit weaker than professional grade paints isn't really a problem. And as Gabor mentioned, if you are out in the field, it's actually kind of convenient that you can just then go directly into the pan and paint onto your paper. Whereas if you have a professional grade paint that's very, very heavily pigmented and re-wets very easily, you often need to have an extra step where you can't just go straight into the pan and onto the paper. You'll end up with something that's way too strong. So it's easier to control if you have something a little bit weaker. So in that case, I don't have any problem with recommending. Generally, what I'll tell my students is if you can get your hands on one of the other student grade paints, like the Van Gogh or the Schmink Academy or Aquafine, which I've had great experiences with, then go for that. But if you can't, if you live where I live and your access is to local stores and you want to get a paint box tomorrow, then you should just go get one of these. And then as you develop and you decide which colors are missing, you can do things like pulling out this white, which I mean, it depends. Some people use it, but you can pull out some colors that you don't use as much from here and replace them with a professional grade paint or a paint that you like better, a color that you like better. And then as you run through different colors as well, you know, if you find you use ultramarine a lot, and you go through the entire ultramarine because it's kind of weak and you have to dig into it, well, then that's the time to then buy a tube of professional ultramarine and just squeeze it in. That white is very useful for some misty effects. That's cool. Yeah, I don't use white, but you know, everyone uses their paint differently, so it's nice to hear from someone who does use the white. So anyway, so when you start painting, whether you start with professional or student grade paint, here, I'm gonna grab a sketchbook and I'll swatch this out. Here. And then grab a great big brush. Maybe not quite such a great big brush. Grab a medium brush. No one is judging you for ignoring white paint. Well, I think that actually probably I'm in the majority here, in that I don't really know what to do with white paint. Misty effects make sense. Anyway, so here we have, you know, this is what your main if you get a starter palette that's made by a brand, in most cases you'll end up with something that looks like this selection, where you'll have a more lemony, like a more greenish yellow, and a more orangey yellow. You'll have something that's a middle red, or I guess in this case it's more of a scarlet. You'll have either a deeper or a cooler red. So this is called alizarin crimson hue, sort of a pinky tone. Then you'll have scrub. Ian Fennelly uses white paint a fair bit. He says it's useful if you don't want to use a lot of water because you're in a hurry outside, etc. Oh, that's interesting. I'm not sure I really totally understand that logic, but cool. He uses it to make gray quite a lot. Does he also use black, or is he using like then 3 paints? Kind of neat. Anyway, and then you'll have your phthalo blue, which, as you can see, this one re-wets just fine. So I'm deliberately using quite a stiff brush. Like this brush usually I would use for lifting, which is going to leave some brush strokes, but I just can't be bothered to scrub this much. And I want to get some strong color here. So just be aware of that. So it's taking some wizardry to get this much color payoff off of these things. Anyway, then you have your sap green, which is, yep, pretty weak. And this is a yellow ochre. I found the Cotman Phthalo Blue to be the most beautiful variant, but my Cotman palette came with the Pro Ultramarine, so it made a huge difference. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, so I feel like if you got a Cotman set with the Professional Ultramarine, you would have just, in general, much better experiences. Have you tried the Winsor & Newton Professional Phthalo Blue? I actually don't mind the Cotman Phthalo Blue at all. What I like about both the Cotman and the Winsor & Newton Professional Phthalo Blue green shade is that they are, they have a really tealy undertone. And I tend to like colors that have that sort of shift from mass tone to wash where you have that variation. I find that variation really beautiful. He basically says, do what you want. People who say you shouldn't use white are just stuck on rules and talking out their ass. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I don't use white for a variety of reasons. And I don't teach with white. I think that there are reasons to learn to paint lighter colors without using white. And then once you understand those reasons, you can say, well, in this case, I do want that, for example, that misty effect. So mixing paint with a white pigment will give you a sort of hazy effect, which is if you're glazing a bunch of things on top of each other, may or may not be what you're looking for. So to understand that, and to understand that you can just make colors by adding water, totally makes sense. Likewise, understanding how light works and how light interacts with things and why shadows aren't just, you know, color plus black, can help you understand why you might want to use black sometimes. So, you know, I do use some black paints, usually in the like very heavily granulating black paints. But I haven't really found a great use for white. There are some artists who I really admire. What's her name? Oh gosh. It'll come to me. There's a botanical artist who uses a layer of Chinese white under all of her paintings, and then it creates a bit of a barrier that allows her to lift up and create really soft, shiny transitions, which is really neat, and it's a unique approach. Hi Caroline, how are you? Yes, so today we're talking about making palettes and choosing colors and stuff. So if you start out with, you know, a standard set, you're going to end up with a color selection like this. And then as you paint, you might find that some of these colors don't work perfect. I'm sorry. Getting a little. You can't really mimic the non-vibrant light colors without white. Think about lavender. I mean, you can't mimic the behavior of the paint, that's for sure, but I beg to differ. You can definitely mimic it in a painting. Here's a painting. No white here. Anyway, I do have a professional phthalo blue pan from Winsor Newton, but I try to use that phthalo color sparingly, too staining, but I'm slowly getting familiar with it. Oh, okay, yeah, so you like the fact that the Cotman is less staining. That makes sense. That makes tons of sense to me. For the hue, I agree, but it will be much more vibrant. By the way, stunning painting. I mean, but you can mix it with, so you can mix it with its complement and then tone it down. For any, like, you can, without using white, you can reach any color within your color space. That's not to say that it's necessarily the best way or the only way. If you want to paint a flat white or a flat lavender color and you want it nice and even, like that gouache look, then you want to use lavender or you want to use gouache. And like that's not a judgment of that choice. It's just there are multiple ways to do anything, right? So it might even be easier in many cases to get to something by using white. But if you're trying to then add shadow and add form to that, then you have to be contend with the behavior of the white paint, which you may want to do or you may not. So knowing how to get to the color without using white is also useful, I think. Even if you then decide to use white. So, I mean, I don't tend to use white, but what I will use fairly frequently is I have buff titanium and gray titanium, which I sometimes use. And those can be super useful as well. And that's basically the same concept. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't use white, but just, it's not the only way to do things. Like, there's never only one way to mix a color. Like, you can mix the same green shade 27 different ways. You can mix the same lavender shade a bunch of different ways as well. I remember the book Botanical Sketchbook from Mary Ann Scott and how she got blasted for using white. Yeah, I mean, I think that's ridiculous. If you are using, it's not a principle thing. Like if you find a way to get the effect that you want with white and it looks the way you want it to look, then great. That's awesome. My only objection to white comes when people use it as a crutch and then aren't happy with their results, if that makes sense. So if for example, you're trying to paint something like those irises and you think the only way that you're going to get that color is by mixing a purple with a white to get a lavender color, and then you paint that and then you try to paint the shadows and they come out sort of milky and hazy, and you didn't want that milky hazy effect, understanding that that is the behavior of the white pigment and that you can get that light color without using white is useful. Gray titanium, I think I only saw that one in Roman Schnall. Roman Schnall has it, and now Daniel Smith has it. Not trying to argue, as I agree. The same hue and value is perceived differently if it is opaque or transparent. The paint behavior is different. Once it's on the paper, yeah, whatever. I think we're all agreeing very forcefully, so I'm gonna move on. Yeah. Okay, so brings me to my next thing. When you have a selection like this, Some people will start with a selection like this, and this selection is perfect for them. But this is sort of an average selection where some people will look at this selection and they'll think, you know what's really missing? I need a dark, deep blue to make like moody blues. I need a Payne's gray or an indigo. That's what's missing from this. Some people really like purples and they'll want to add a purple to this. Some people will look at this selection and they'll say, no, you know what's really missing is a fire truck red. I've also not painted the white. That's not, you know, some people will say, I don't know what to do with that white, like me, and some people will, that's their favorite color. So at that point, you can, like, I think that you have to start somewhere. And so wherever that starting point is, I think for most people, it's going to be something like this. Just realistically, most people start with a pre-made set. And most people start with that regular pre-made set. But it doesn't have to be. I mean, you know, some people will dive right in and they'll start with the Core Mini. And let me flip to that page. So some people will start, oh, of course, and I already had that, these swatches. Haha. So here you can compare. And so many things. So here you have the Cotman versus these are professional paints in similar colors. Ish. Or you could get a different color set. So for example, if you're starting with the Core Mini, which is, if you buy from Core, this is their starter set. So this is a professional grade paint set. And what's sort of unique about it is it has a sort of different color selection as most starter sets. So it does have this like 2 versions of yellow, but the 2 versions of yellow are slightly different. It has these 2 reds, or sorry, a red and a magenta, and it really goes for magenta rather than a more rosy color. It also has an orange, like a true orange, a true violet or purple. Again, it has the same 2 blues, a sap green, a couple of earth tones, and then Payne's gray. Or neutral tint. I don't know what they call it. Payne's gray. So whatever you start with, though, you might find that one or more of these paints just doesn't work for you. And I think that's a great place to start for either adding to your collection or replacing these colors. So you start with your set and then you start adding and replacing things that don't work for you. So for me, one of the first things that I noticed was just none of the yellows behaved the way I wanted a yellow to behave. And I am going to demonstrate that with some paints. So if I take this and I take my cloth here and I clean up my yellow area. They're gonna drive people crazy that this isn't like properly cleaned. Okay, so if I have this, right, that's sort of a clean-ish mixing space. And I go back to this page. My issue with yellows was when I take a yellow, really any yellow, like, what is this one? So what am I going to use? I'm going to use a professional paint that's from one of these sets. I'm going to start with the cadmium lemon, or cadmium yellow primrose from Core, right? So if I paint this out, this looks like a fine yellow. But what I don't love about this yellow is if I try to glaze it over, say this green, right? If I try to paint over this green with this yellow, instead of mixing, it's just going to create a haze. And it's not going to look like I've got a mix of green and yellow. It's really going to look like I have yellow over green. And then if I mix it, it's got this sort of milky texture to it. So say I want to mix a green, and I'm going to mix it with a phthalo blue, right? This is a very transparent blue. And I mix this in here. See how I get this, well, it looks sort of milky. So this doesn't bother everyone, but it bothers me. I want my greens to be very transparent at all times. I want to be able to glaze them. I want my yellows to be something that I can apply over other colors to brighten them up. Yeah, that's a PY35. So there's nothing wrong with this color other than I don't like how it behaves. And especially when I was starting out, I mean, part of this is, you know, there are some things that I have gotten used to, but especially when I was starting out, I had it drilled into me by all of the botanical art books that what you want is a really transparent pigment so that you can keep on layering them up on top of each other and just get darker colors. And almost all yellows are going to be, yes, what Paula said. Yellows are almost all either opaque or semi-opaque. So, you know, yes, cadmium is sort of an extreme, but you know, it's also, that's also how a lot of yellows behave. So here's my Billy Shoals set. And let me figure out what that pigment is. I have it in here somewhere, I think. Yeah, right. So this is Sennelier Yellow, or Sennelier Yellow Deep, which is made with PY83 and PY153. And again, so this is going to be a warmer yellow. And it's a really lovely color. Like, I really like the shade of yellow here. It's really beautiful. But then, again, if I take this yellow and I say, yeah, I want to mix this yellow here with, say, a blue. We'll use the same one. Again, you've got, there's nothing wrong with this green, but it is somewhat opaque. So if you go and apply it as a layer over something else, it's going to leave a bit of a haze. And this was very confusing to me, especially at first when I started with botanical painting, because botanical painters go on and on and on about how you need everything to be very bright and transparent. And my impression with all these yellows was, well, they're not very transparent. Correct. Primrose is referred to an opaque yellow with added white. Strange choice for a 12 palette. This is cadmium yellow primrose. There is no white in it. It's just PY35. This is the core version. I don't know what, like, different brands might have a different formula for it, but there's no added white. It's just cadmiums are somewhat opaque. Very opaque. Anyway, you can see it most on the palette, I think. If I bring you in closer to here. You see how it's like milky? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Hey. Just this like milkiness to this paint. Okay, cool. And I just pulled my camera stand out of its support. There we go. Sorry. Right, so I dug around and I tried a bunch of different yellows, and what I eventually settled on is, you know, rather than having two yellows, there's basically one yellow that I use. And I will sometimes use a different shade of yellow if I just need a pure yellow. So either I'll use, I do have smaller quantities of things like Indian yellow. This is a PY153. So that's a really lovely color. Or a, this one's from Roman Schmal. It's called, I think he calls it permanent orange, but it's really more of a gambogi color as well. And I love, 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 love that color. So if I need like a marigold color, I might use one of those. And if I need a lemon yellow, then, you know, I've experimented with PY1 75, PY3. I have a few different options there, but then if I just need that really, really, you know, a pure yellow that's one of those shades, I will occasionally use just a little bit of yellow. But the one yellow that I really use for my mixing is Nicolazzo yellow. And so Nicolazzo yellow has PY150. It's also sometimes called transparent yellow. And it is the most transparent color of any color index. Which means in the pan, it looks brown. Because if you have dark yellow, like what's a dark yellow? Dark yellow is just brown. Sorry, let me just bring you closer. I realize that I'm painting entirely off screen. There we go. I like the slightly opaque cadmiums, but that primrose seems a bit too much. And Dalerani Professional Primroses with added white. Jeff Kersey likes it very much. Yes, to be honest, I don't have a huge amount of experience with cadmiums. They're expensive pigments. They are somewhat opaque. They're toxic. There's just not been a huge motivation for me to really try to use them. So I've had a cadmium paint here and there where they come with sets, or I get them as a sample or something, but I haven't really used cadmiums very much, so I can't really compare them terribly well. Anyway, so what you'll see with the Nicolazo yellow is that it is somewhat brownish in mass tone, but then as you paint it out, you get a very bright yellow. And when I mix that Nicolazo with, we're doing everything with phthalo blue here, there's just none of that milkiness that you get with any of the other yellows. Oh, well, there is some milkiness because now the cadmium's invading. Because I chose to use a core paint and the core paints just shoot across the page. Where did I put? Let's dry this off and do this demo again separately. Hi Gina, how are you? Sorry. So, you know, this is a personal thing. Like, I know that the majority of artists are completely happy with other yellows. This is a personal thing where I know what I like. And what I like is I want my yellows to be liquid sunshine. And I want them to mix so that when I mix the yellow with the blue, I get a green that's completely transparent. And when I glaze over something like when I glaze over something like my phthalo green here, I want to be able to just glaze it without it showing up as a hazy layer on top. So, you know, when I'm starting with a starter set, that's one of the first things I'll replace is I'll take out the two yellows and I'll put in my one yellow. Want to learn about glazing? Cool. Well, I can do a different thing about glazing. Today we're just sort of talking about how to adjust palettes, how to work, like how to build your own sort of palette. I think that a lot of people struggle with sort of what I'm demonstrating here is you end up with just a whole bunch of different sets of paints, and how do you choose what you're going to paint with and how to sort your paints and etc. Have you found a big difference between different PY 150s? No, not really. I know that there is a lemon shade of PY 150. I have heard of this magical thing and I've used it in a mix. I wish I could get my hands on it. But most of the PY 150s you're going to find on the market are pretty similar. Some of them are a little bit warmer, like a little bit more orangey, and some of them are a little bit more lemony. I tend to use the M. Graham, and it's very saturated. It's also of the Nicolazos that I've used, it's more on the lemon side. So Nicolazo is a little bit interesting where it looks like it's a sort of a mustardy, like it looks like it'll mix it looks like it's on the orange side, but it's actually, in terms of mixing, it behaves more like a lemon. So you could mix some very bright lime greens. I have the Winsor Newton version and I find it a bit strange and natural, something along those lines. I Yeah, it's very strong. It's extremely high tinting. Like all of the nickel azo yellows are. The Winsor Newton version, I would say it's about middle of the road. It's somewhat more on the lemon side than, say, Daniel Smith. It's not as crazy high tinting as M. Graham or Core. If you want one that's a little bit gentler, Schminke's Transparent Yellow, which I have in one of these, I think. Let me find it. Yeah. So Schminke's Transparent Yellow is very much like, here, I'll paint this out. This is Schminke's versus that was M. Graham's. So they're very similar. I don't know that there's any major difference there. My M. Graham is Azo Yellow. I just checked. I got the 10-50 milliliter tubes. Yes. So M. Graham's a little confusing because they have nickel Azo Yellow as well as Azo Yellow. Their nickel Azo Yellow is the one that I'm talking about, the PY150. The Azo Yellow is also a middle yellow. It's a similar tone, but it's slightly more opaque. Which means that it won't glaze quite as cleanly. You'll have a little haze when you glaze a yellow over something else, with most yellows. And basically the two exceptions are, you can use, or 2 or 3 exceptions. There's a couple of things that you can use, so that are in the general yellow family. Nickel Azo Yellow is going to be the only one that's like a real yellow. I think I'm gonna eliminate this from my palette pretty soon. One of my favorite, before I found Nickel Azo Yellow, I liked Green Gold, which is very similar to Nickel Azo Yellow, but it's a little bit more muted and on the green side rather than being a pure yellow. So that's this here. But basically it has the same, you can mix almost exactly the same greens. Because it's a little bit greener, but it's also a little bit more muted, your range of greens that you can mix with Green Gold is almost identical. So this is PY129. So that's, you know, make of that what you will. I think this is what I'm looking for. And then the other thing is, this is what I'm looking for? Yeah, it is. Okay. The other thing that people use as a glazing yellow is, this is quinacridone gold. Now these days, quinacridone gold is just made with usually a mix of nickel azo yellow and something else. In this case, this is the original Quin Gold pigment that I've got here. So PO49. That's been discontinued since 2011. Daniel Smith bought up the last of the stock and carried it for a lot longer than other brands, but even Daniel Smith has now discontinued Quin Gold. Sorry, and I'm running off the screen again. Pull this off here. Or pull this forward. I have nickel azo yellow from Core, and it seems to be the one yellow I don't use much. Right, so, I mean, I think this goes both ways, right? So if you have a starter set if, for example, I released a starter set and I said, hey, I'm selling the Leanne Gold starter set, and I sold you a starter set that has 12 colors, my starter set would definitely have nickel azo yellow in it. And you might take my starter set and you might decide that that yellow is not right for you. And that's fine. That's totally good. Like, you know, you have to choose what paints are right for you. So I really like it. I really like, I'm just, you know, I'm using myself as an example. So one of the first things I do is I replace some of the colors with colors that work better for my mixing and my glazing. So the other thing like that is, if I go back to my core mini, so this has its original colors in it. And I have enough paint sets that I don't need to replace my colors in each one. Sometimes I just challenge myself by painting with colors that I'm not so used to. But another thing like that is, this color is something that's very common. It's PR 254, and it's a pyrrole red. And it's just, this is fire truck red, right? It is a bright, bright, bright red. Original Quinn Gold, that's a unicorn for me. I've never seen it in real life. I have a hoard. It's actually a little unreal how much I have, given that I knew it was being discontinued when I first bought it. Like, I bought it after most brands had already discontinued it, but Daniel Smith was still carrying it, and I bought a tube. And then just by chance, the day, like, there was some rumors flying around just, you know, in the weeks before Daniel Smith discontinued it. And on a whim, I ordered 4 tubes. And it turned out that that was 2 days before they announced that they were discontinuing it. So I have enough. I don't frequently use PO49, but I have enough of it to last me probably a lifetime. In fact, I should probably squeeze those tubes into pans just so that they won't go funny, or put them in my freezer or something. I would totally buy the Leanne Gold starter set. I seriously, I keep like hinting to paint companies like, hey, do you wanna, yeah, someday it'll happen. Some paint company, some paint maker wants to make the Leanne Gold starter set. Talk to me. Anyway, so here you have a bright red. This is PR 254. And you'll find this in a lot of paint sets. And I don't use it very much. Over time, I've kind of settled into, I prefer to have, because I use nickel azo yellow, and because this mixes more like a lemon yellow, and I'll show you what I mean by that right here. So if I take this nickel azo yellow, and there's some cadmium in there too, because, you know, my palettes are all a mess. And I mixed some red into it. Really... I can't get a good orange if I start with this. Like, this is a terrible orange. I mean, it's not bad, but it's, you know, it's more of a... sorry, and I'm running off the screen again. This is really more of a quin gold color than like a bright, bright orange. I was close to buying Denise's Da Vinci set, but the shipping outside the US was too costly for me. I want Roman Schmal to make me a Leanne Gold starter set. And I've been hinting and like, hey, you know, we could do this, but it's not... hasn't happened yet. There's a terrible orange, no such thing as a terrible orange. Okay, Paolo, you're actually going to agree with me. I want to have the ability to make a bright orange. Having the ability to make a bright orange is important to me. And it's not gonna happen with just a nickel azo and a middle red like this. It doesn't happen. This is the brightest orange I can really make. If I add more red, then it quickly just goes to red, but I can't make a bright, bright orange. So if I want the ability to make a bright orange, and I do, then I need either a warmer yellow, which we've already discussed is a problem for me because I want a very transparent yellow, or I need an orange. And so for that, I have found transparent orange. And this is not negotiable for me, but there are two options here. So one of them is PO71, and that's what you'll find from Daniel Smith and Core and Schminke. And that pigment has been around for a little while longer. It's not super common, but a bunch of different brands carry it. And then the other one is PO107, and that's actually just a temporary, or that number hasn't been officially assigned. What I'm painting here is from Winsor Newton. And so if you get Winsor Newton transparent orange or Aquarius orange from Roman Schmal, cadmium yellow plus cadmium red, nothing comes close for a bright, bright orange. Yeah, and then you'll have like an opaque-ish orange. Right, so I want to have a bright orange, which means I actually get, instead of adding this middle red, which is sort of opaque-ish, well, it's listed as semi-transparent, and it does behave semi-transparent. I don't know, something about it. I don't love this color. I guess I don't really like reds so much. I don't paint very many red subjects. I tend to paint more orange subjects than red subjects. I don't know what that's about. Gabor says, Daniel Smith transparent orange is my nemesis. How so? Anyway, so then I use an orange, and then the other thing that I do in my palettes, nearly all of them, is instead of having this rose color, I go for true magenta. So my usual choice for true magenta is PR122. So that's here. And with that, I can mix a lot of violets and stuff. So I don't necessarily need purple, but I often like adding a purple anyway. And then I choose a bunch of blues. I like a bunch of blues to mix with this yellow. They had a batch several years ago which was very deep red, but you could water it down to orange. Then they fixed it. Yes, yes. And I'm also trying to get my hands on that, because they fixed it right around the same time that, yeah, I'm a little frustrated by that too, because I feel like that I have a specific use for that specific thing that I can't get my hands on. But oh well. There's the pigment in that one. Palo, it's also a PO71. They just have a somewhat redder shade. Yeah, so that's those colors, and then there's just, you know, you can adjust individual other colors and fill up a set. And so what I end up doing, I know that some people sort their paints by brand, or try to make paints for, you know, this is a landscape set and this is a skin tone set and a lot of that. And I don't do a huge amount of that. I do have a few little like specific purpose sets. So this is one of them in here. And do I have a swatch for that? I think I do. I do. Okay. So this one is a little bijou box, which I've filled with, these are paints that I had in half pans that are colors that I really enjoy, but that I hadn't really found a great use for in other palettes. And so this is something that I can just carry in a small purse and do some sketching with. So it's got a range of colors that, you know, that I can paint with, but that I usually reach for. And the idea is, if I'm just out and about and these are the paints I have, well, then these are the paints I'm going to use. So I made up this set, which has a different set of pigments than I usually use, but a similar sort of paint range. So this has a PY128, which is an interesting, this is by Rembrandt, which is, I was looking for a more lemony shade of something like a PY150. It is still a little bit more opaque, but I do like it. It's fine in this application, so I put it in there. And then I'll make some somewhat bigger sets. So this was my, recently rearranged it. You can see how I use all my paints, but this is a larger selection, and this would be something that I might carry if I'm going on a longer trip, or if I'm teaching a class. I often carry this when I'm teaching classes, because this one has a lot of the paints that I like using frequently, but it also has some other paints that I don't necessarily use as frequently, but might be useful for teaching. So it has, you know, a warmer yellow and lemon yellow and regular phthalo blue in addition to a phthalo turquoise, etc. So this is quite an extensive set, but it's still a little palette. This set here is what I took with me when I went to Australia. There's a whole series of videos where I put together this palette, but it's a nice little compact set. It seemed right for a trip. Inside, I've got 15 colors. Is that right? Yeah, 15 colors. 12 of them are whole pans and 3 of them are half pans. Right. And I'm making a mess of myself. Oh, sorry, it's 16 colors because there's a split pan in here where I've got 2 parallenes. And so in here I've got this selection. And what you'll notice across all of these different palettes is that some things repeat. So, you know, almost all of these palettes are going to have a transparent yellow. The brand might vary, but it's almost always there. Almost all of them are going to have a transparent orange. Almost all of them are going to have a quinacridone magenta, PR122. Almost all of them are going to have an indanthrone blue. Some things are always the same. Some things I change depending on which palette, because then what I'll do is I'll have my set. I'll put in the things that I just can't live without. And in most cases, you know, with very few exceptions, those paints will end up in each of my palettes. But then for the other ones where it's like, this is funny, I got my Daniel Smith and M. Grahams in front of me. I love all paints. Right. So I mean, I guess this is a little bit more challenging if you don't have very, very clear favorites, but I think most people do develop their very, very clear favorites. They're, you know, they're however many it is, whether it's 1 or 3 or 5 paints that they just can't live without. So, you know, I know what those paints are for me, and those paints will show up in every palette, but then other things I'll just switch around. So if you're comparing, you know, 2 of my palettes, I mean, maybe that's another thing that I can do here on this very last page of the sketchbook, is if I take these 2. So these are 2 different palettes. They each have 16 paints. And these are both, you know, sort of hefty studio palette sort of things. So this one is a variation of my studio palette that I put together. So when I put together my studio palette, I then also put together this set, which has a lot of the same colors. And the goal was to just have a set that I could carry around that was very much like my studio palette. So if I started something out in the field, I could bring it home and still work on it in the studio. Gina says, my goal in life is to paint roses and birds lifelike. Well, nothing like practice, right? I would recommend both sketching birds in movement, which is a challenge, but it'll start getting you to understand how they're put together. So go out to a park with a pond or something and sketch the birds as they're moving. You're going to get a lot of really quick movement sketches. And then also if you can go to a museum or look at photos, and I mean, if you can go to a museum, you're going to get a lot out of being able to see a 3D object. You can generally contact the collections coordinators in ornithology departments to get them to get access to birds up close and personal. But also just if you go to like a museum exhibit and you see the taxidermy birds, you can get a much closer look at how they look. Also, this last one is, you know, potentially a little bit gross, but I keep an eye out for window strike birds, like birds that have died recently, and freeze them. And then use them to paint from life. Well, not life, obviously, but then you can get a much closer look at like what their feathers and stuff look like. Another person to watch out for is Mary Sanch, who's another Canadian natural science illustrator. What is going on with this? This looks much greener than the other. Excuse me? Okay, that's interesting. So I don't know what happened to my green gold here because I've never seen it be quite so green. So I guess I probably just dropped some other paint on it. But there's no equivalent there. Then this one has, over here has this Nicolazzo yellow, right? So this one is from M. Graham. But this other set here will have also a Nicolazzo yellow, very much the same. This one's the Schminke transparent yellow version, but you'll see they're pretty much identical. So that's, you know, that's a paint that I'm gonna have pretty much no matter what I make. Then I have here, I have another, an orange. So this is the, I think in fact this one's identical. This is both the Winsor Newton transparent orange in here. And in this set, hey, let's bring this right here. Thank you, Lee. I watched a 2-hour class on YouTube yesterday, Audubon Society. I learned a lot. Yeah, that sounds great. Was it like sketching live birds, or what was the topic of the class? So then this is the transparent orange. Then this one, I've got a Da Vinci Carmine in, which I didn't put in the other one. So this one has Da Vinci Carmine. Yep, I've got them, whatever. No, nope, sorry. I've got it backwards. Let's try to pick that up. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to match which colors I put what in. So this one I got here, right? So this is Da Vinci's Carmine, which is a PV19 pigment. And then there's nothing there. This is not a paint that I put in. On that one. But then again, I will have 2 quinacridone magentas. I'm not sure what brand I used in each of them, but you'll see they're pretty close. I think this one's Magello, and the other one is maybe Winsor Newt. Yeah, I think this one's Winsor Newton. So you'll see these are two different sets that I made at two different times, but over time I've really developed a pretty clear preference for which pigments I use. So there's a lot of similar things. So then this one I have, but you'll see there are also some differences between the two. So here I have a quinacridone purple in one set. I just wanted more of a purpley shade. And in the other set, I put a mix of two. There's a split pan here, so half of it is perylene violet and half of it is perylene green. And so I'm just getting the perylene violet here, but just showing you, you know, I was realizing that I wasn't using the perylene violet on its own very much, so I wanted to experiment with different alternatives in that spot. So here I added that. It's about drawing wings, he goes plein air, I don't. What is that green on the right palette? This one? That is Schmincke's May green. So, I mean, you know, here I've got a green gold. In this palette, that's probably the closest match, as I have this. May green. Yeah, so then what else? Then I've got this one. So then I've got the same paint over again on both of them, where I just really like having an end in thrones, so both of them will have an What happened here? That doesn't look right. Sorry, I might be painting out of the wrong pan. Is it this one? Oh, there it is. Apparently, I organized them differently. Okay, I need to switch brushes. This is driving me bonkers. I had this really stiff brush for picking up the student grade paints, and now I'm just like scraping at my paints. It's not a happy time. So I'm switching brushes to something softer. One of my favorites, so bright. Yeah, I really like it. And it's really, you know, when you want that bright green, it's nice to have it just there. What else? So then I have what have I done? What is this? Okay, so then I do in fact have ultramarine. So ultramarine is sort of, for a long time I didn't include ultramarine in my palette, and recently I've found a new love for it. I really like the Graham ultramarine. So you'll see a lot of these are just the same. I can make different palettes, but I just, I'm a creature of habit, and I've just sort of settled on, I always make the same things. Instead of in some of my larger palettes, I'll sometimes include a phthalo blue, but if it's a smaller palette, I tend to include a phthalo turquoise. So here's one of them. This one is the Holbein one, which is really quite greenish. I think they call it marine blue. This one is, I don't even know what brand. It's a little bit less greenish, but it's still the same basic thing. I'm gonna grab some paper to keep going on this. If I have, like what I'm noticing here, and it's interesting that we brought this up, is how do you choose colors? Well, I choose a few colors that I like, but the thing is, over time, I've gotten a lot more consistent about which colors I reach for, to the point where, I can have 3 different palettes and they're all pretty much the same. And, I'll do some experimenting here and there, but when it comes to actual painting, I've basically settled on what I like. So then, coming back around, here I have a green apatite, and this is something that I wouldn't necessarily have in in a studio palette. Like you'll see it's not in that studio palette there. But I really like it in a portable palette, so it's in both of these. And the reason why I really like it in a portable palette is that when you're painting on the go, you want to create some texture and variation, and you don't necessarily have the time or the comfortable seating to create that in lots and lots of thin little layers like in a traditional botanical painting. So this is a good one-shot mossy green. And I've got it on both of these portable palettes. Right? So here we go. Then what other green do I have? Well, here I have a perylene green. So this one's a perylene green. So here we have, here's 2 portable palettes with a similar number of paints, and you'll see just how many of them are the same. Like a couple of things are different, but I've gotten so consistent in what I paint with that if I'm making a palette, I'll just, the brand might be different, but I'm basically using the same things over and over again. I like putting my paints into categories: warm blue, cool blue, reddish brown, orange, earthy yellow, etc. And then I put a specific paint into the category and use it for a while, then swap it around. Yeah, and so I think that's sort of what I end up doing. And then the last category that I tend to add, you know, I'll have, I tend to start with like a primary and secondary, so cyan, magenta, yellow, and then secondary, so violet, orange, and a green. Although I'll shift those around a little bit, where sometimes I'll choose a more violet toned blue rather than an actual violet, for example. So I'll shift those around. I mean, I have a whole video series on those choices. But then yes, you can just choose individual colors to swap out like that. But then the last category that I add is just fun stuff. And so you'll see in some of these cases where it's like, oh, well, the fun stuff really is fun. Where, for example, the next thing after this perylene green is I have two different sort of fun blues. So on one of these palettes, I have a blue apatite, which is kind of like the green apatite. It's like a very interesting, muted, granulating blue. Let's try to get some more of that granulation pattern going. So as that dries, that'll show some interesting stuff showing up. And then in this one, I have a cobalt teal. Sometimes I go quite extreme and go with triads. Yeah, and so the other thing that I've done historically is when I'm starting a painting, and I used to be very strict about this, is I would choose the colors that I'm choosing in a painting first. And I have a video about that too. But I would look at, you know, what's the main color in this subject? And I would choose a paint to match that. And then I would choose, you know, what's the secondary color and do I need any complementaries to those colors? And I would end up with each painting only uses about 4 to 6 paints. Or sometimes even less, sometimes just like 2 or 3. Then this is like news to me sort of stuff, but I avoided Potter's Pink for a really long time, and then the past couple of years Potter's Pink has been sort of my obsession, where I really like it. It's this really, really soft granulating thing, and it just adds a little bit of that dusty, like wind-blown winter texture to like winter, like fallen leaves and twigs and stuff. So I really like using Potter's Pink, so I have 2 different versions of it. There's some Potter's Pink. What else have I got? My earth tones are a little bit different. So let's try to match these up as closely as possible. So here I have a transparent, okay. So this, yeah. In this palette, honestly, what I feel like I'm missing in this palette, having used it for a while, is I tend to like having a dark earth tone, but in this palette, I decided I could mix a dark earth tone, and instead I chose this quinacridone brown madder. It's from Schminke, and in German it's crab brown, which I just love. Here, push this over this way. In the Australia palette, I went a little bit more classic with my dark brown. I think I have a hematite here. Come on, get some tint out. It's been sitting for a while, so it's a little hard to re-wet. But I love this. So this has a darker brown. I always envy artist palettes where colors are used up, but looking at your palette selection makes me a bit more relaxed. We set up a well-used palettes and lots of satellites. Yeah, I mean, you know, I definitely admire artists who can just commit to, like, this is the only palette I'll ever need. I am far too curious for that. I want to try all the things. But when it comes down to it, like, you know, when I'm painting, I've painted for long enough that I know kind of what I want. So then here I have transparent brown iron oxide on this palette. And on the other side, this is a bit of a surprise to me. I think I have, this used to be one of my all-time favorite colors. I believe what I'm gonna find here is, quinacridone burnt orange. Yeah. Where's the last one? What am I missing here? Oh, okay. I see. And then the last, so here I have, this is Monte Amiata Natural Sienna. Eventually I'm just going to replace this with a regular raw sienna, I think. So this is Monte Amiata Natural Sienna, and then I believe that in this one I have Spanish Gold Ochre. And I think this is the version made by Ev Bolt. But I'm not actually sure. Maybe this is the one I made. In any case, it's been sitting for a while. It's a little hard to re-wet. This pigment does get quite, is it? This isn't, sorry. Come on. Up, 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 up. Scrub, scrub, scrub. Okay. I take it back. I'm not sure what's in there. Is it? Me? I don't know what I put in here. Because that's not looking like what I expect it to look like. So maybe it's something else. Or maybe it's just contaminated. Maybe it's just contaminated. Well, that's a little upsetting. Anyway, so yeah. And then the last thing in this palette, which hasn't been swatched, is in this palette, because I was going to the rainforest and I was debating. So instead of a red, I actually replaced a red with another green. So I actually have a full-on phthalo green in here. Is this a landscape palette? Sort of, I guess. So this one is very nearly my studio palette. This is what I call my traveling studio palette. So it has almost the same colors as the outside ring on this one, except instead of phthalo green, I put green apatite, and it's missing phthalo blue because I've already got the phthalo turquoise. So the notion was I can go out, I can take this if I go to a conference, I can teach a class with it, I can carry it around, I can do my work anywhere. I can take it out in the field, and then I can use the same colors when I get home. So that's the idea behind this one. I mean, is it useful for landscapes? Yeah, probably. Probably also useful for all sorts of things. I love how neat that palette map is. Well, you know, it's so neat because I didn't draw it. I had my husband trace this out for me and make my template because I'm a hot mess. The other one, this one. Yeah, so this side, I mean, you'll see they're almost the same. There's a couple of differences. This one is what I took with me to Australia. And so I had some sense of I was going to be painting some landscapes and some, you know, natural science subjects, and I kind of just needed something very small that I could fit in a pocket was the other. So the other concern with this was I was really space limited because we took some national flights in Australia, and the airlines there, they don't allow checked baggage. Not that we wanted to check baggage anyway, but they also weigh your bags. And it's like a 7 kilogram max for all of your bags. So I folded this up and put it in a coat pocket because they're not weighing clothing on your body. And so watercolors, no matter what, they're kind of heavy. And I was very, very, very weight limited. So I wanted something that could have a fair bit of different colors, but be quite compact. Bright tropical skies, oceans, and muted greens and gold. Yeah, so, I mean, this is still, actually, this is probably fine. So, I mean, I'll show some more of this. I'll do a proper palette tour at some point, but yeah, I mean, it turned out to be a great color selection for what I used it for. In here, yeah. Yeah, I was quite happy with that color selection for the Australia palette, and I'm making a mess of this over here, but yeah, definitely no complaints. Anyway, I'm not sure what I was expecting to find when I started this paint out, but what I have found is that over time I've become extremely consistent, where like no matter what I make in terms of new palettes, they tend to always include a lot of the same things. And in fact, I think I can actually share some more examples of that. I can find where I put Sorry, one moment. Figure myself out. Okay, go. Yeah. And then if you compare either of those to example, you know, here's a larger set and it's got a lot of the same colors. It's also got some other colors that I was experimenting with, but you'll see again, there's a lot of similarities. Where do I have? Not these, not those. Come on. Oh, maybe it's on a different page in the same sketchbook. That would be annoying. Yeah, I think it is. So then if you look at, for example, this is a, where is that palette? Here. So I had a bunch of paints sent to me by Roman Schmal. And so I put together a palette with, sorry, 4 rows. 4 rows? Yeah. 4 rows of 7 each, 28. Colors. So this is a larger selection, but you'll see even then, now I've added another lemon yellow, but I've still got the Nicolazzo yellow. I've added a golden, oh, it's called golden yellow, PY181. It's beautiful. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous color. And if it was available in anything other than pans, like I can't wait for Roman Schmal to start releasing tubes because I really want that in my main palette, badly. And then there's a transparent orange, an azo red. So here I have added a red. I don't have, this is one difference. I don't have their Quin Magenta in this palette. Instead, I have their Quinacridone Fuchsia, which is PR202. Look, I'm diversifying. But again, a Potter's Pink. Now, because I was somewhat limited by what colors I have from this brand, I wasn't going to buy more. I already have too many. I use a cobalt blue deep instead of like an ultramarine, or usually I would have Indian Throne, which I do have, but it's in this palette. So I didn't want to pull it out. It was also mostly done. So I just put in some of their blues. Their cobalt sea blue is the prettiest thing. Again, the green selection's sort of weird because that's just what greens I have from the brand. And then a whole bunch of their interesting effects paints, but then you'll see my color selection of earth colors is pretty consistent as well. So, you know, no matter what I'm building, whether it's a larger palette, a smaller palette, I end up reaching for the same things over and over and over again. Hi, Val. Anyway, yeah, other than that, that's one way to organize palettes. Another way that people will sometimes organize palettes, I don't really do this for myself, other than this Roman Schmal palette, but some people will just keep the same brand together. And generally, you know, I pick and choose from all different brands, and I don't really see the point of only having one brand in one set. I sort by pigments rather than brands. But if somehow you end up with a lot of paints from one brand, these are not all of my Roman Schmal paints, but I did put together a set that's just Roman Schmal paints. It's kind of nice to work from sometimes. Other than that, the only things that I have in branded sets are, I have the Core Mini, which still has its original colors in. As I run out of these colors, which will be a long while, I imagine, because I don't use it that much, then I'll probably just replace it with whatever paints that I feel like replacing it with. Hi, Kenneth. Hi, Lindsay. 4:30, and I think I'm actually wrapping up, so I'm really, you know, welcome. Indian yellow as in PY 153. How does it compare to Indian yellow? Okay, I can show you. It's probably, let's do that with a live demonstration, shall we? I like this PY 181 better than I like PY 153. And I say this as a hoarder who has a lifetime supply of PY 153. But I like this better. I find it's a little bit, I don't know, juicier, if that makes sense. Like, here. So here's the Roman Schmal version. And this is, and to give a fair comparison, I'm going to give my favorite version of PY 153, which is the one by Sela Paint Company by Elijah. So it's close. This is my favorite PY 153, and it's, you know what it is? In mass tone, they're very similar, but the PY 181 mixes stronger. So they're both lovely. But I think I prefer the mixing behavior of this PY 181. They're very, very similar though. The golden yellow, I think, is green gold PY 129. Sorry, which? I do have PY 129, but that's not this. This is PY 181, and this is, yeah. Anyway, any of you who do want to get your hands on PY 153, yeah, Elijah makes a really, really gorgeous, gorgeous version. I guess that's, you know, that's something else that I am slowly looking at building. Here I have this is the beginnings of what's going to be a all handmade paint palette. This and this here. And eventually it'll all be in here in this set. But I'm waiting on a paint set from Sterling to finish building that. since Amazon Prime is so easy, I'm an art hoarder, but I call it living the abundant life. That's definitely a real struggle for me. I am at the point where I'm overwhelmed by keeping track of all of these things. So this year I'm doing a low buy, no shopping year. There's a couple of purchases that I know are coming, where I'm buying from Handmade paint makers, for example. But I'm not shopping. I'm not buying any more paint. I'm using what I have, and getting to know my paints and really like learning to appreciate them, and that's been working out great. And as you can see from like this hoard, it's not like I'm at all lacking things. Are you making your own paints? I may do that someday. I don't. So I own some pigments. I have tried making paints. I haven't done a lot of it, but I mean, I can show you some of the stuff I have. So I deal with some chronic illness issues. So I've found that a lot of the synthetic organics just take more mulling than I am really prepared to put into it. Sorry, just trying to figure out what all I have. That. Right, so I have a bunch of things. So this is raw sienna. So the story here is I really like this specific shade of raw sienna. And I know it's this specific shade. This is Comma Pigments. They are a Canadian pigment manufacturer based in Montreal. And I really, really like raw sienna, but specifically the raw sienna from all of the Canadian paint brands. And so, in fact, I can show you that. This is from Sela Paint Company. If somebody wants to link Elijah's shop. So Elijah is a paint maker in Toronto. Lovely, lovely guy. Anyway, I really like this raw sienna shade. Makes me happy. But it turns out that if I want to have it in like a tube form, well, if I want it in liquid form so that I can load it in a ceramic palette, then I pretty much have to make it myself because it's the only people who make it sell it in pans. And mostly half pans. I prefer to work out of full pans or even larger containers. So I do have that to make it myself. Likewise, I have a few other pigments from Comma. This is Spanish Gold Ochre, and this is Salmon. So this is a PR 101, and this is Spanish Gold Ochre. which I really enjoy. I also have graphite and Van Dyke Brown from Kama Pigments. I have a couple more things from Kama. And then I also have this Nicolazzo Dark PG10, which I have a bunch of these. I've promised them to a few other paint makers. I was really interested in this PG10 pigment. It's like a green gold, but greener. The thing is, I don't have the energy to mull it. So it's just been sitting. And then I got sent a little quinacridone gold. So this is PO49. This is very, very precious. And this is a suspension. So this is in water. So the pigment's already mixed and I still need to make a video about this. I'm not growing broke at all and I live on low income. I just happen to spend my money on my passion. If I ever sell my work, then I may buy Schminke, but I refuse to pay their high prices. Gina, consider checking Jackson's art. It's based in the UK, but they have very, very affordable shipping worldwide. And they often have some great specials on Schminke and watercolors in general. The Jackson's watercolor sale should be coming up soon. I know this because it always overlaps my birthday, which is on February 15th. And so usually I would be loading up a cart at Jackson's right now, but I don't need more paint, so I'm not doing that. But if anyone else wants to load up a cart at Jackson's and tell me all about their haul, I will be glad to hear about it. That teal you painted inspired me for a tropical seascape doodle with ink. That sounds delightful. Joy says, Lee, I don't suppose hubby wants a new hobby. I mean, I think he, like me, has too many hobbies already. Anyway, does anyone else have any questions? Or, because I think I'm reaching the end of my content here. Say hi to Neuron. I will, absolutely. This was lovely. Thank you for coming. So I've got links to a bunch of other live streams happening this weekend. I also, here, I also have a Discord channel, which I should have linked on here, but I think I may have forgotten to link. Maybe link to Selah. Yes, can somebody drop in a link to Selah, please? One of my lovely mods, Paolo maybe? Or Cyan? And if somebody could link to my Discord channel as well, that would be wonderful. There's also some links to some other live streams. Now, I will have to edit that because I've got the times backwards on the 2 Sunday live streams. So